Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here at my next YouTube video, and this is going to be my next Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles episode review, the Nickelodeon show. And I'm going to be reviewing today episode 22 of season 1, which is titled The Pulverizer Returns. So, I'll start off with my overall thoughts. It was a good episode. I suppose my issue with it is that this didn't feel like an episode 22 of a show. Like, for me, when you get to episode 2 of 26, you should be really, really getting into, like, the deep end with this sort of stuff. And in many ways, my issue with this comes back to an issue I've had with some of the previous episodes. In this whole April plot with the Krang. They made a huge deal at the end of last episode about April staying in the lair, and I don't think she was even in the episode. And, that's a pretty big plot, I think, in the show right now. So, when they just completely ignore it for an episode, and when they ignore it for an episode to bring back a character like the Pulverizer, it kind of makes it even worse. Like, I don't mind the Pulverizer, he's fine. But that April plot was so interesting, and they just kind of put it to the side for this episode, completely kind of forget about it. Now, if this episode did some interesting things, the whole thing of seeming like at least some of the Krang are going to team up with the Shredder to take down the Turtles, at the end of it, that was interesting. But the fact that this team up happened because of the events of this episode was pretty kind of disappointing to me. That I felt like it should have been this crazy epic battle that ultimately kind of said that the Turtles are such a big threat to the Krang and Shredder that they team up. But no, it was because of this battle that happened in a warehouse. The Krang, the Pulverizer was involved with the Foot Clan, and that is what led to the alliance because of something that happened there. Now, it's just, I feel this show kind of struggles to just continue rolling along with the kind of intensity that it has at times. It's done this a few times now, mainly revolving around the kind of April plots and that sort of thing. And Karai, I don't think was in this episode either, from what I remember, or at least wasn't a main character in this episode. So, I get that they're setting up a lot of things to maybe be explored in the finale or going into season 2, but it gets to a point where you actually set up so much stuff that you're getting no resolution out of each episode. To me, this felt a bit fillery, and I don't call episodes of TV shows fillery without really thinking it through. Because, a filler episode really is an episode that means nothing to the plot. So, in many ways, this is not a filler episode, but I felt the Pulverizer plot happening at this stage in the season, for me, didn't work that well. Because he was fine as one of these kind of mid-season characters who appeared. He's maybe a funny character. Maybe they're going to do something more serious with him later. But what they did with him here, while interesting, just kind of stole a lot of momentum that the show had through the April Karai kind of Shredder kind of plot that they had going on. And in the end, I think it'll probably work out well for the series that it has this. They seem to be setting up this almost side plot of kind of maybe like the 2003 show with the kind of portal thing in the Turtles' lair, where they kind of kept going back to the I don't even remember the name of the people, but it was kind of this kind of Atlantis sort of thing where these people were trapped there, the mutants, and Donatello had this side quest to that they kind of went back to every time to try and cure them. I kind of get the sense that that's what they're doing here with the Pulverizer, or Timothy, whatever his name is. Now that he's become a mutant, that's going to be this kind of more emotional kind of thing for Donatello, that he really wants to restore Timothy's humanity. Now, that in itself is where I don't I think this episode kind of got the tone of aspects of this wrong. Now, I've complained, I suppose, about this show in the past, like mainly with Fishface, Dog Pound, maybe some of the other characters, that they haven't explored the whole thing of a human being mutated and the loss of humanity. Now, they specifically said that in this episode. I think it was I think it might have been Donatello or Splinter said it in this episode, that they specifically said, Timmy's lost his humanity, we'll try and get it back for you. Now, that's great that they're addressing that, he wanted to be a mutant, he became one, but realised that it's wrong, that he it's not what he really wanted in the end. I get that, that works. The problem was that they made the guy such an idiot about the whole situation. They made that scene like so silly when the Pulverizer kept going back to go under the mutagen kind of pump thing, Donatello calling him back, because we have the super logical one and then this just idiot. Now, this is where the development of this guy as a character, I think, just failed, because this episode could have done something interesting where they actually did develop him as more than just this comical character who thinks he's amazing but isn't really, and they just didn't do anything with him. They just kept him as this silly character who doesn't seem to have any serious moments, really. Now, they may do that when more than likely he will get turned back into a human, or they may just keep him as a mutant and do something with him there. But this episode, I felt, just got the tone of the whole him getting mutated, the lead up to him wanting to become mutant and stuff like that wrong. Like, that's where I felt this episode kind of didn't work too well. I'll say again, I liked the kind of overall picture, what this added to the story, in that it had the two villains basically teaming up against the heroes by the end of it. So that's going to be a huge threat going into the finale. You have that April Karai thing to come back to. You have the whole Splinter hasn't fought Shredder yet in the background. Like, is Karai Splinter's daughter, maybe? Something like that. That's all set up. April's father is still in still under kind of Krang capture. But, they need to address this more often, I think. Like, it's kind of one of these things, like, what type of a show is this? Is this show actually trying to have this kind of continuing storyline, or is it just trying to do a series of one-off episodes? It's kind of trying to get the best of both worlds and not quite hitting either one of them that well. And, that's why I suppose, I'm a huge Avatar fan, as you probably all know. That's why I like Avatar so much, because they just go down the road of, like, every episode is going to continue off the next one. And then it works, because you're never really complaining about, this plot hasn't been touched in a while, why did they suddenly forget about this? That's kind of becoming a problem now in Turtles. Hopefully, now with only 4 episodes to go, they'll address that a bit more, that they'll come back to more of this stuff, and the last 4 episodes will maybe be more of a, like, boom, 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 boom to the finale, one continuing off the other. Of late, they've kind of tended to go for, here's this thing that happens to be connected to some stuff, here's this thing that happens to be connected to some stuff, and maybe the odd episode that kind of runs into the next one. So, it's an issue I think the show has, and I'll probably kind of come back to it more when I've seen the full season, maybe rewatch it, and we'll be able to address a bit more, but just right now, that just heavily came to my mind with regards to this episode. Now, other aspects of this episode, the Turtles, I haven't really talked about them much in this episode, and I have a slight problem with the way what they did with the Turtles in this episode too, because it seemed, this is where I suppose a bit of a fillery thing came into it, because them being suddenly overconfident or something like that because of their weapons and how easily they're beating the Foot Clan, and then this whole Foot Clan recruitment thing that led into the Pulverizer coming back into things, that was kind of fine as a setup, but when it became the weapon switch episode, and then they didn't even execute it like fully for the whole episode, it was just kind of a waste of time. We saw them briefly fail using weapons, which I felt just didn't work at all. Like, you're saying that these teenage Ninja Turtles who've been training for 15 years have zero experience with their brother's weaponry, and are actually so comically bad with weapons that are not their own that even a complete amateur could probably do better. Like, Leo trying to wield the bow staff, I think, was just... It felt like they didn't put any sort of logic into, like, okay, this guy doesn't use a bow staff that often, so he's just going to be a complete idiot trying to swing it around. I just felt that didn't work at all. Like, I guess he wouldn't be amazing with a bow staff, but the fact that he wasn't even, like, holding it correctly, as if he's never looked at Donatello use a bow staff before, it just was... Oh, it just didn't work at all for me. I understand, like, it could have been done really well, and I think the recent kind of Free Comic Book Day comic that covered the same thing did it well. Just this didn't really work at all. And especially when, is the comic and this in the same continuity, like, why did they do it twice? It's just even more confusing. And again, another complaint I suppose would be that it then went from being the weapon swap episode to being, oh, this is the episode where they just don't have their weapons. And that, they just didn't go whole hog on either one. Like, it wasn't just he took their weapons away or they had to swap weapons. It was both of them getting like half the time they maybe could have gotten their own episodes, while being the subplot of an episode. It was just kind of too many things going on with regards to the Turtles' weaponry. And, in the end, like, the whole thing came down to them not learning how to adapt to other weaponry, but rather find things that are roughly the same as their own weapons and use them, which doesn't really prove anything or show them developing more than Donatello realizes that a broom is similar to a bow staff, as opposed to maybe like Donatello picking up something like a chair and starting to fight with that or something. So I think that this episode just tried too many things and just didn't focus on one of them enough. Now, this is probably the most I've kind of maybe complained about an episode. It wasn't bad, but it just had so many of those moments where I'm just like, you didn't quite think that through right here as directors, that sort of thing. And overall, it's probably not the worst episode of the series. It's just an episode that happens to do a lot of things. A lot of them are interesting. It just didn't execute most of them as good as they could have. So, while I'm complaining, it's just, they could have done all of these things well had they given them more time and not had all of them together in one thing. But overall, it's a solid episode. I just hope that the last 4 episodes are more focused on the grand idea of this story. That they really run with the way this kind of episode ended, with the Shredder teaming up with the Krang, that whole thing. That it becomes a real fight, that they bring that whole April is important to the Krang thing into play. That they bring Splinter into play a bit more than just him being the guy to help the Turtles develop a bit more. So I just want the show to just focus more on telling a story as opposed to introducing new things, that sort of way. But yeah, it was a good episode, not the best. I have good hopes for the future. Thank you for watching this review, so bye.